Hello, everyone. Welcome to EyeSee's webinar on using virtual shopping for research during and after the ongoing health crisis. We will tackle the topic of testing in context and try to clarify why it is generally considered the most effective approach for behavioral research. We'll touch on how to do it remotely and if it is the right way for brands to prepare their shopper research approach and adjust it to the new normal, especially as it pertains to CPG and retail. I have two amazing guests today that will share more about the practicalities of using virtual shopping in research and some of the more general questions and misconceptions about this testing method. Let's welcome Jonathan Asher, the Executive Vice President of EyeSee, and Bojana Berisavljevic, who is an Insights Manager at EyeSee. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Sonia. Thank you very much.
Hi, Sonia. Thank you for having me.
First up, some housekeeping info. Our runtime today is about 20 to 25 minutes. If you have any connection issues or technical difficulties, don't worry, we're recording this session and we will be providing everyone with the video in the next 2 days. Additionally, if any questions pop up during the webinar, feel free to type them out in the chat box on the right side of your screens and we will get back to you shortly. We will cover the state of the virtual shopping research today in the first part of the session, and then move to a guide on how to set up a shopper study using virtual stores and the different options there are on the market. So let's begin. To start this conversation off, I'd like first to remind you that we've been running consumer tracker studies over the past several weeks as the pandemic developed. We covered a lot of ground in our previous webinars, and if you missed them and some of the topics sound interesting, I will include a link to a handy overview of what we did so far in the right bottom corner of your screens. Just like we saw the online shopping behavior change in our last session, there are many shifts that are taking place in physical retail as well. So today's webinar is meant to cover the different ways you can leverage virtual shopping to gain reliable in-store insights at a time when in-person research is not possible. So virtual shopping is a method that enables brands to gain insight into the way consumers shop for their products. Do consumers buy it off the shelves? How many items do they buy? Which items they buy together? Does your new concept cannibalize the current offer? Is your POS material effective in driving sales? How well does your brand perform compared to your competitors? And many others. All this is done through an experience that is meant to simulate a real shopping trip and capture the behavioral metrics in context. Jonathan, could you break it down for us? Why is context testing important?
Sure. As you said, the context in which we test can make a big difference in terms of the results that we get. Basically, for truly predictive insights, the study design needs to ensure that the results obtained are unambiguous and not dependent on subjective and external variables. We know, for example, that some clients use a handful of in-store interviews to hear shoppers talk about how they experience a new package on the shelf, which could be very informative on a certain level. However, in and of itself, this type of study will not provide predictive insights about whether that new pack is seen on shelf, liked, understood, and ultimately purchased in a way that's predictive of in-market results. Nor does an approach like that allow for meaningful subgroup analysis. And of course, these days, it's not possible to interview shoppers in person. But context matters, which you do get qualitatively because a more realistic context guarantees more accurate results. In addition, we always encourage clients to get a full picture of anything that they're testing.
A full picture meaning both implicit and explicit, right?
Yes, that's right, with KPIs from methods that focus on both sides of the performance equation. It is one thing to get comments on your new package when it's viewed on its own, as if sitting on a table, but a completely different thing seeing it perform on a shelf. The pack needs to win at the shelf first. When you think about the fact that an average consumer spends only 5 seconds per aisle and that an average supermarket contains about 50,000 SKUs, you see very quickly why it's so important to test everything in a realistic context. If consumers miss your point of sale display, your shelf-ready package, or a new pack in that crowded shelf environment, there's no way that they can buy your brand.
Yeah, it's the old adage of it's not what consumers say, but what they do that matters, right?
Right. We need to move from learning only about their explicit attitudes and cognitive thoughts to watching them explore the shelf with a shopping mindset and collect that critical behavioral data.
Are there any obstacles when it comes to this? And how do you explain the value it brings to clients and stakeholders?
Well, importantly, some people have overreacted and latched on to some new hot metric or approach or flavor of the month, if you will. For example, System 1 decision making has become quite the hot topic in the past few years and has led researchers to incorporating the sort of implicit measures that align with it. In some cases, though, totally abandoning any explicit or rational metrics. In my experience, that's a mistake because both implicit and explicit together will reveal the full picture. Essentially, the whole of multiple research methods is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. And getting back to how to conduct implicit behavioral shopper testing, what are the various options that exist today to understand what will happen in a real store when some new marketing effort is introduced?
Well, while question and answer surveys were once the only option, now they can be included with shopping from a shelf. That shelf can be created using live product and 3D comps on actual shelving, or using a photographic two-dimensional print. In recent years, the technology has provided the ability to create these kinds of shelves in a virtual way, either using headsets or displaying on a computer screen. Both of these high-tech options provide great flexibility in what can be tested, be it packaging, signage, displays, planograms, or any combination of these.
Can you tell us more about how it has evolved? What's the state of the tech right now when it comes to creating digital store environments? How does online virtual shopping fare against virtual reality and headsets or other formats of research?
Sure, the technology has evolved quite a bit, both in terms of the quality of the visuals and the time and cost for development. Comparing virtual reality via headsets versus online virtual stores is useful, as both have garnered a great deal of attention over the past few years. Virtual reality with headsets provides the sense of shopping from a life-size shelf, with the respondent feeling as if they're standing in front of it, walking around it, and picking up packages from the shelf, all of which is great. However, the headset itself is a rather expensive piece of equipment, and the creation of the images can be costly and time-consuming. In addition, using it requires conducting in-person testing, which in the best of times requires an extensive investment of time and money, or would lead to using a small qualitative sample. And of course, these days, it's not possible to conduct in-person research of any kind. Online virtual store environments are very realistic looking, but the respondent is experiencing it via their computer screen, so it feels a little bit less lifelike. But this approach does not require expensive equipment, is much less time consuming and expensive to create, and is much more efficient to field the study, even with a large quantitative sample, such as our standard pack studies of 300 per cell. And of course, this method can be utilized when in-person testing is not practical or possible, such as now. Importantly, this virtual shopping has a very high correlation with real shopping behavior, as much as zero point 0.8 or 0.9 out of a possible 1. So very, very highly correlated with real shopping in a store. Ultimately, the approach one uses is a matter of trade-offs between obtaining highly predictive insights and what the investment required is to get them. With in-store qualitative testing, it is efficient and there is context, but too few interviews to provide predictability. With VR headsets, you do get predictability, but it's not very efficient. Online virtual shopping provides the best balance of predictive and efficient. And ultimately, online virtual shopping provides the best value for the money.
So Jonathan, just to be clear, what are the key benefits of using online store environments in your opinion?
Well, there are three key reasons why using an online virtual store is a really good idea for brands right now. The first is knowing that validation of virtual store results is very high, as I mentioned, on average 0.8 compared to that of 0.3 for surveys. Second, given the current conditions with the COVID-19 crisis and the inability to conduct in-person research, it has become necessary to consider whether online virtual shopping testing can be conducted effectively using these kinds of methods. And what we've seen, fortunately, is that the findings are quite stable, even during the crisis. They hold up to pre-crisis conditions.
Thanks, Jonathan. This was very informative and also a great introduction to the second part of our conversation today. Now moving to the more practical part, setting up studies, combining the right methods, and choosing the best type of store for you. So Buana, could you guide us through the three types of virtual stores that we offer? What are their main differences and features?
Sure, just like Jonathan mentioned, virtual shopping on the whole has a very high correlation with actual purchase behavior. And having said that, I want to point out that not all research questions require the same setting to highly reliable results. There are three testing levels: 2D, 2.5D, and 3D stores. 2D stores entail shopping in front of an interactive shelf. So the respondents are shown a virtual shelf and they can click on any product they want to zoom in and add to their shopping carts. These studies are done in only a few days and are best suited for smaller scale planograms, package testing, or maybe some initial concept testing. And the price starts around $2,000 and can go up to $5,000 depending on the number of SKUs.
Well, thanks. That's very straightforward, but 2.5D is something kind of hard to imagine.
It is, but don't worry, the difference is obvious. So in 2.5D studies, they have fully interactive two-dimensional shelves, and additionally, navigation through the store. So the respondents can navigate the store by using arrows. And here the product images are not fully 3D, but we use 2D models in perspective to create a sense of depth. The turnaround is still quite fast, 3 to 5 days, and these stores are usually used for testing POS displays and bigger planograms. And their price ranges from $3,000 to $10,000. Now, respondents in 3D stores have the full 3D experience. These stores feature fully three-dimensional products and store environment with the most advanced graphics. So you have a video of moving through a very realistic store and an optional 360-degree product view for product exploration. And in the future, we will even have free navigation, as if you were in a first-person game. And such studies take around 2 weeks. We recommend them for multiple tests with the same retailer. So for example, if you plan to run more than 5 tests in the same retail environment, this would be a really good investment. And prices start around $6,000 to $8,000 for the lowest number of SKUs, which is usually between 100 and 200. I would add that the 2.5D option combines the benefits of both alternatives: the speed and cost effectiveness of a 2D store and free navigation, and the immersive look and feel of a 3D store. So for most clients, this is the way to go. And finally, the product models have different levels of detail. There are the flat 2D images, 2.5D images, which really add a lot when it comes to the impression of three-dimensional space. But there are also just images. And then there are the 3D models, which can be rotated like this. These are very useful if you're making a change in the shape of your packaging, or if you have a very recognizable non-standard packaging. In these cases, it is very cool to have an actual 3D model of the product. So the client can choose whether they want to provide all the images for themselves, or if the supplier should source it. And this level of flexibility is great for the clients because not all of them can invest the same amount of effort or need to have the same type of control over the study. So we let them choose what works best for their objective, time frame, and of course, budget.
Interesting. Thank you for laying it all out, Boanna. Moving on to the methodological framework. Where do we see virtual stores in application? I mean, do you use virtual shopping on its own or combined with other methods, and which ones?
Okay, so that's a really great question. Many people initially think that virtual shopping is only related to shopper studies, but in fact, we see it as a part of many other studies as well. And what I mean by this is that if you are testing a new flyer or a new TVC or a long-form content such as product placement or branded videos, it is useful to add virtual shopping as a segment of your study design so that you can measure uplift in sales as an effect of the tested material. It is very convenient to have this as a part of your study that delivers sales KPIs compared to survey KPIs or visibility data. So for us, virtual shopping is a tool that complements many study types. All this to say, it is the most useful in shopper marketing studies. Whether you use it for package testing, MPD studies, SRPs, or POS SEM materials, virtual shopping is a crucial part of any research. So how do we do it? Like we said in the beginning, standout and visibility data is key. So we use eye tracking in virtual stores to gauge if things are noticed first in their environment in order to have a chance at it being bought. So let's take a packaging study, for example. After the respondents are screened into the study, they are shown a shelf in a store environment while we track their gaze and also ask them to pick out the products they would buy. And we measure the product consideration, penetration, and value share. Next, we give them a task to search for a specific product on the shelf, and we measure to what degree shoppers accurately find it and how long it takes them. This findability measure is particularly important if you are changing the packaging design of a product and need to ensure it is still recognizable, especially for current brand buyers. Only then, after having this unbiased insight into how our material performs, the respondents will get to see it in a standalone mode, which gives us further data about which parts of the package were noticed, in which order, and how visible each area is. In the end, we go to the survey and reaction time measurement, which is optional. With surveys, we capture recall, likability, brand fit, status purchase intent, the explicit opinions. Reaction time measurement is an additional implicit measurement as the quickest responses tend to reveal the gut feeling and are most believable. These are great for assessing attributes and seeing how strong the connections between the product and some descriptors are.
That's great. Thank you. It seems like virtual stores are really invaluable to get to that first moment of truth only in a virtual setting.
Yes, I would agree. I would advise clients to think about their research holistically and combine as many methods as possible. This gives us a far better chance of getting our predictions right than granular knowledge, especially if it is done in a context that mimics the real shopping experience. It also provides the most useful insights to guide design refinements that will lead to greater in-market success.
Speaking of other areas of research, there's some virtual environments that are not strictly used for making purchases in front of a shelf, but we use them for a more complete store experience.
Yeah, so you're right. Aside from testing only shopping in front of a shelf, we can utilize virtual environments to test different marketing materials and their impact on sales. So for example, we can test different versions of a poster on a wall or a coffee shop and see which had the most significant impact on sales. We can have electronic store environments and have video in video options, meaning all the different screens in the store can show different messages, promo videos on the panels, TVs, or laptops. We can then use eye tracking to see if they were noticed and whether this priming and exposure affected the subsequent purchases. I would add that this type of highly customized environment could be an excellent tool for luxury brands, cosmetics, and the makeup industry, or any kind of in-store materials beyond simply displays. So for example, we can have a screen inside a Sephora, a Walgreens, Macy's, or a brand's flagship store showing an ad for a particular type of product, and we can measure whether this messaging has affected decisions made in front of the shelf. I mean, the possibilities truly are endless.
And one last question for you. We know that virtual shopping as a method is reliable during regular times, but how does data from virtual stores hold up during the crisis?
Yeah, so that's a question that really is on everyone's minds right now. Should you keep testing during a time of shaking consumer sentiment? Well, I would say you should, and for multiple reasons. The most important one being the ability to catch up with the change in behavior after the crisis subsides. As far as virtual shopping goes, we ran a replication study to confirm the validity of our findings. We compared the data from April to data from last year to see if any unusual things are going on with the method, but all the results were stable. So if you used virtual shopping before the crisis, you can continue to rely on it now. And if you haven't, our benchmarks can still be used for insightful comparisons. When we look at the benchmarks, we need to keep the crisis in mind and repeat studies to confirm our findings later on. And since we know that virtual shopping has a high correlation with real shopping, one can have a complete confidence in using it for any type of shopper marketing or A/B testing, or even if they've never done it before.
Thank you again. Thanks to both of you. I think whoever tuned in today has a much clearer picture of how they can use virtual stores to make sense of whatever changes the future of retail has in store. Pun not intended. Now, before we close today's session, can you share one key takeaway for our listeners today?
Of course. I would say that the technology has evolved tremendously, and virtual stores are much more accessible and effective than they were even just a few years ago. They can now be a vital part of remote shopper research, providing more highly predictive insights than you could obtain otherwise, especially when in-person testing is not an option.
Thank you.
So, along the lines of what Jonathan just said, there is something for everyone at different price points and at speed levels. So, I would advise people to try and see for themselves the value it brings to their research toolkit.
Thank you again for joining us today as guests. And thanks to all of you who were with us today. I hope this was a useful overview of how you can leverage virtual stores to stay atop of the new normal behaviors and attitudes that we see forming in high speeds right now. If you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to share or ask, reach out to us via our website, email, or social media channels. Stay safe and have a great weekend.